Hi everyone. In this video we're going to be talking about the unseen extract, which is paper 2 section A of the AQA Literature Spec B course. This is for political and social protest writing, and for the purposes of this video I'm going to be using an extract that I have created from The Handmaid's Tale. The Handmaid's Tale won't come up in the exam because it's already part of AQA's reading list, so they won't use it as an unseen. So this video really is about practicing and figuring out how to approach this unseen extract task. I actually quite like the unseen extract task. Yes, it can be daunting because you're going to be talking about in an exam a text you've probably not read before. But firstly, you've got to have confidence in yourself that you do know the module political and social protest writing, because essentially this task is assessing your ability to connect the extract to the genre, which is AO4, but it's also really about about having flexibility, and it's sometimes nice to have flexibility and not know what you're going to be writing about, because of course for the whole of your A-level you've been working with set texts, so it's quite nice sometimes to have something a bit more flexible and spontaneous to talk about. So in this video I'm going to be familiarising you with what the question is, because the question is always the same. We're going to look first at the extract synopsis, because the synopsis box that the examiner writes is a useful source of information to contextualise the extract. We're then going to read through and analyse the extract, and then I'm going to end this video with an example essay showing you the plan and how you take your annotations really and put it into some kind of coherent essay structure. In the exam, you will have approximately 1 hour to do this, and I always say to students a good 15 minutes of that time could be analysing and reading the extract, and then you've got 45 minutes to actually write it. So do be quite generous with yourself in terms of how much time you want to read and analyse it and get to grips with the extract. I've already made one video for the unseen question, which was about 2 years ago now. It was for Fahrenheit 451. Which was an extract that came up, I think it was 2017. So Fahrenheit 451 is the other video that I've made about this. So if you go into my unseen extract playlists, you will see it. So firstly, the question. The question, like I said, is always the same. Explore the significance of elements of political and social protest writing in the extract, 25 marks. And what this task is essentially assessing is your ability to make connections. AO4 is the connections assessment objective, in which students connect the text to something else, mainly the genre. So you should have been familiarised right from the very beginning of your course with the elements of political and social protest, such as rebellion, powerlessness, democracy, justice, all these kind of terms. So really this exercise is about you knowing the genre, and the examiner is saying you should be therefore be given anything, and you should be able to tell the examiner how that extract fits into that genre because you're finding these elements. So that's what this is essentially assessing. The examiner of course knows that you haven't spent months on this extract, and they know that you've probably not seen it before. So examiners are encouraged to mark this perhaps slightly more leniently because of that fact. So we do know, because I'm an examiner, we do know that students are probably going to be a little bit less confident with this than other questions where they've been studying the text for months. So it's all about connections. Once you've understood the question, the next thing to look at on your page is the synopsis, which is a small paragraph that the examiner will write for you at the top of the extract. And it's really, really important to read this and highlight this, because this can help really contextualize the extract for you, to help you. So why wouldn't you use it? So in a second, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to ask you, if you want to just bullet point in front on your paper or somewhere everything that you would regard as significant from this paragraph in terms of what this paragraph tells you about the extract and what is potentially useful. So it says The Handmaid's Tale was published in 1985 amid the backdrop of second wave feminism and presents the dystopian totalitarian theocracy of Gilead and the impact the laws of the regime have on its citizens. Set in America, women are removed from their partners, children and jobs and forced to have children for commanders and their wives. In this extract, Offred is still in the Red Centre where aunts teach women how to be handmaids. Here, a fellow handmaid, JANINE, is subject to the habitual testifying ceremony. So, at this point, I would be encouraging my students to be highlighting this even before they've read the actual extract, because this has got potential leads in it. You're hunting here for things that are relatively important and helpful in terms of your subsequent interpretation of the extract. So pause the video now, write down what you regard to be significant, and then I will go through the annotations with you. Okay, so there's actually quite a bit of significant information which I would regard to be particularly useful and significant if I was going to be writing a response to this extract. So the date first, 1985, which means this is a contemporary novel and it's therefore a 20th century novel. So we're not dealing with anything particularly historical here, like Shakespeare, for example. We do have some important AO3 material, second wave feminism. And of course, some students might not know what that is. Although with literature students, because you have done the coursework, some of you might have used the feminist theory from the critical anthology, in which you might be able to guess what second wave feminism was. So if you're not sure what it is, you would obviously have to guess in the exam. So think about what that could be. What could the aspirations of that movement be? We have some very useful keywords here in blue: dystopian, totalitarian, theocracy, and all of those words are to do with the module. So they actually give you some useful AO1 terminology and AO4 terminology, which you could then use in your own response. The setting is America, and think about why that country. Why set this kind of dystopian regime in America? What was the writer Atwood hoping to achieve by setting it in that country? I've highlighted women here because that tells us, therefore, that in this particular regime of Gilead, women are the figures of oppression, unfairness, and exploitation. And that's nothing unusual, because some of you might be studying A Doll's House, for example, or The Kite Runner, both of which again target women as a symbol of oppression. We have the word forced, which again is significant in terms of political and social protest, and they're being forced to have children, which essentially means that they are being raped, and the state is happy with that happening because it's part of their regime. So we have here state-sanctioned rape. And again, if we think of The Kite Runner, if you're doing that text, we often say with The Kite Runner that The Kite Runner shows that how sexual violence can often be used as a tool of power. Commanders are the names of particular leaders in this regime, and of course if you command something it means you have power and authority. So what's also really important to look out for with your unseen extract is the character names, because sometimes they could be called Sir, Commanders, Corporal, Brigadier. So look at the titles of their names, because that can also tell you who has power and who does not. We have reference to Offred, who is a character. She's also actually our narrator of the novel and this extract. And you might not know, but Offred has changed her name. Her name has been changed for her because in this regime, women are taken, their name is taken from them and they are given a name. So the name is representative of possession because it's of Fred. So Fred is the name of the commander that she's with. So to be of Fred means that she is belonging to somebody, she's a possession. The extract takes place in the Red Centre, which is significant because it helps us understand that this is a place of education, and that will make sense when you actually read the extract in a second with me. We also interestingly have the word teach. Of course, teach is quite a noble word. It's nice to be taught, but there's a fine line with teaching. So think about what's interesting about the word teach if you are forcing or brainwashing students. What does that mean? And finally, the ceremony that we are going to be reading about is called a testifying ceremony, and it's also habitual, which means that it's repetitive. It happens many times. And Janine is the person that is being asked to testify about something in a form of kind of public spectacle and public humiliation. So importantly, what I always encourage my students to do, even before they read the extract, is to highlight and engage critically with this synopsis, because it will often help you in the right direction. It won't tell you, of course, everything, but it will give you some kind of skeletal structure which you can then take forward. So please always do critically engage with the synopsis first. That's why it's there for you, to help you. Some of you might have seen Handmaid's Tale on TV. It has become an incredibly popular series. I think it's now had 5 or 6 series. The first series is the only series about the book, though. So if you want to just stay true to the book, then it's just the first series. And then it became so popular, they decided to make many more series afterwards. This is from episode 1 of series 1, where we see the testifying ceremony taking place. And you can see that the handmaids are in their red gowns, which was the standard, and also their white hats and bonnets, which again is significant because that's what they wear. And you can see Janine there, sat in the middle of the circle, sat next to Aunt Lydia, who is the kind of teacher figure. So the women that are in kind of brownish coats are called aunts, and the red girls, the red women in red cloaks, are the handmaids. So they are the ones that are being taken from their children and lives and are being forced to become handmaids. And this is part of Janine's testifying, where Janine has to admit something that's happened in her past to try and seek atonement. Margaret Atwood, the writer, actually had a cameo in this episode. She actually became an aunt. She actually was in a brown coat, and she actually hit one of the characters. I think it was Offred. So it was interesting that the writer of this novel actually starred in her own series, which I thought was quite cute. Anyway, so before we read the extract, let's just look at some questions. So I would encourage students to have these questions in mind as they read the extract, because the answers to these questions could be particularly significant when you come to try and figure out what's going on and what it is that you want to talk about, and importantly, how the events of the extract connect to the module of political and social protest. So have those questions in your head as we are looking through the extract. So I'm first going to read the extract with you, and then what we're going to do is we're going to analyse it and think about what is significant in terms of political and social protest. So this is what the extract says. This is Offred speaking, remember, as our narrator. It makes me feel safer that Moira is here. We can go to the washroom if we put our hands up, though there's a limit to how many times a day. They mark it down as a chart. I watch the clock, electric and round, at the front over the green blackboard. 2:30 comes during testifying. Aunt Helena is here, as well as Aunt Lydia, because testifying is special. Aunt Helena is fat. She once headed a Weight Watchers franchise operation in Iowa. She's good at testifying. It's Janine, telling about how she was gang raped at 14 and had an abortion. She told the same story last week. She seemed almost proud of it while she was telling. It may not even be true. At testifying, it's safer to make things up than to say you have nothing to reveal. But since it's Janine, it's probably more or less true. But whose fault was it? Aunt Helena says, holding up one plump finger. Her fault, her fault, her fault, we chant in unison. Who led them on? Aunt Helena beams, pleased with us. She did. She did. She did. Why did God allow such a terrible thing to happen? Teach her a lesson. Teach her a lesson. Teach her a lesson. Last week, Janine burst into tears. Aunt Helena made her kneel at the front of the classroom, hands behind her back, where we could all see her, red face and dripping nose. Her hair dull blonde, her eyelashes so light they seem not there, the lost eyelashes of someone who's been in a fire, burned eyes. She looked disgusting, weak, squirmy, blotchy, pink, like a newborn mouse. None of us wanted to look like that, ever. For a moment, even though we knew what was being done to her, we despised her. Crybaby, crybaby, crybaby. We meant it, which is the bad part. I used to think well of myself. I didn't then. That was last week. This week Janine doesn't wait for us to jeer at her. It was my fault, she says. It was my own fault. I led them on. I deserve the pain. Very good, Janine, says Aunt Lydia. You are an example. I have to wait until this is over before I put my hand up. Sometimes, if you ask at the wrong moment, they say no. If you really have to go, that can be crucial. Yesterday Dolores swept the floor. 2 aunts hauled her away, a hand under each armpit. She wasn't there for the afternoon walk, but at night she was back in her usual bed. All night we could hear her moaning, off and on. What did they do to her, we whispered, from bed to bed. I don't know. Not knowing makes it worse. I raise my hand. Aunt Lydia nods. I stand up and walk out into the hall as inconspicuously as possible. Outside the washroom, Aunt Elizabeth is standing guard. She nods, signalling that I can go in. The washroom used to be for boys. The mirrors have been replaced here too by oblongs of dull grey metal, but the urinals are still there. They look oddly like babies' coffins. The high school is old. The stalls are wooden, some kind of chipboard. I go into the second one from the end, swing the door to. Of course, there are no longer any locks. In the wood, there's a small hole at the back, next to the wall, about waist height. Souvenir of some previous vandalism or legacy of an ancient voyeur. Everyone in the centre knows about this hole in the woodwork. Everyone except the aunts. I'm afraid I am too late. Had it by Janine's testifying. Maybe Maura has been here already. Maybe she's had to go back. They don't give you much time. I look carefully down, aslant under the stall wall, and there are 2 red shoes. But how can I tell who it is? I put my mouth to the wooden hole. Moira, I whisper. Is that you, she says. Yes, I say. Relief goes through me. God, do I need a cigarette, says Moira. Me too, I say. I feel ridiculously happy. And that's the extract. So, like I said before, this extract won't come up, or The Handmaid's Tale won't come up as an unseen, because The Handmaid's Tale is already a set text from AQA, so it won't come up. So this is purely practice, and because I've created this extract myself, it might be that you haven't seen it before, and therefore for you it is unseen, and you're still practicing the same approach as you will have in the exam. So I want to now go through and start to critically analyse some important bits, and this is again what you will be doing in the exam. It might be that you have to read the extract twice in the exam, once all the way through just to get the gist of what's happening, and then again with a highlighter and underlining or highlighting some of the best bits or the significant bits, which you intend to then take forward into your response. So the extract begins with lots of semantics and words to do with schools and classrooms. You have blackboard, clock, chart, raise my hand. So, and they're also kind of in this kind of educational setting of the Red Centre. So in those kind of places you have lots of rules, particularly if you are a child. It's very regimented and you will often need permission to do things that you don't as an adult. So they want to go to the toilet, but here they have to raise their hands. They're not children though, they are grown women. And yet in this setting, they raise their hand for permission. Offred says that testifying is special. Of course, that's what they have been told. So it goes to show the extent to which the aunts and the Red Centre is manipulating and radicalising the women in terms of almost brainwashing them. That's what they would like the handmaids to believe, even though Offred might have some kind of inner strength to disagree with it. The fact that we're told that this happened last week suggests that this is habitual and that this happens regularly, where women who are not at fault for what's happened to them in the past have to take the blame for things. And in this extract, of course, JANINE is being blamed for being the victim of a gang rape when she was 14 in her past and had an abortion. And because abortions are against the law now in Gilead, because women are forced to have children, that is the issue as to why JANINE is being, I suppose, kind of sidelined or marginalised here and being publicly humiliated. The dialogue between the aunts and the handmaids is quite interesting. We've got lots of interrogative questions by the aunts, like Aunt Helena here, and the way in which the women chant in unison, that very kind of concentrated repetition, or also known as epizeuxis, shows how the handmaids are going along with this, and they've either been genuinely radicalized or they daren't do otherwise, because if they perhaps don't chant in unison, there will be some kind of punishment. So it's this collective effort versus the individual, all these handmaids against JANINE. So JANINE is very much the centre of this ceremony here. As we move on, that dialogue continues. JANINE is being a public spectacle, and she is being made to believe that she is to blame for her gang rape. There's a interesting list, an asyndetic list here of words: weak, squirmy, blotchy, pink, like a newborn mouse, suggesting that JANINE is actually being presented as quite babyish and innocent in that simile. That the handmaids, despite sharing the same position in the Red Centre and in the Gilead, that they are being trained to despise their own kind. So you can't trust people in the same position as you, because they can also blame you and ostracize you and see you as other, even though you are the same. And they say we despised her again, which is quite strong language to show how the aunts and the Red Centre is teaching these women to turn on their own kind. Crybaby, which is repeated 3 times there, more epizeuxis, shows how they're being manipulated, and also how JANINE is being almost seen as babyish and a child, and she needs to basically toughen up, is what they are, saying. Moving on, JANINE actually becomes so broken down by this ceremony that she actually ends up saying it was my fault, I led them on, I deserve the pain. So she has been broken down by this quite harsh and grotesque form of interrogation. Offred then reminds us about what happened to another handmaid, Dolores, or that was at least her previous name, in the Red Centre, and Dolores wanted to go to the toilet, but the handmaid didn't. The aunt, didn't let her, so she wet herself. And even though that wasn't her fault that she wet herself, she was then punished for it. And there's a huge degree of paranoia here because we don't actually know what happened to her. We don't know what was done to her. And the fact that the handmaids are whispering to each other from bed to bed again shows that level of paranoia and secrecy, that in this situation they're not supposed to talk about certain things, and yet they sometimes do, as long as they whisper and don't get heard. So it shows how humiliating the Red Centre is to these women, but also how they are punished for things that aren't actually their fault. Coming towards the end of the extract, when Offred puts up a hand and is allowed to go to the toilet, we get told that Aunt Elizabeth is standing guard, which is very draconian and authoritarian. You can't even go to the toilet in private here without being watched and having surveillance over you. That obviously is very kind of 1984-esque, this idea of surveillance and always being watched, even in your private life. And when she does get into those gents' toilets, she looks and sees that the mirrors have been replaced by dull grey metal, suggesting firstly that they can't see themselves, so they have a lack of identity which links to the name change, but also shows that perhaps the glass has been removed so they can't smash it and commit suicide maybe by harming themselves. So it's again, even suicide isn't being used as an escape here. And then finally, she's gone to that washroom, or that toilet, as it's known in the UK, not because she wants the toilet. She's gone because it's where she can see Moira. And Offred and Moira knew each other. They were at college together before the Gilead came into power. So they have a friendship. And therefore, the toilet is a safe space for them to talk in private and become their old selves again, away from the draconian dystopian regime of the Gilead. So this is a form of rebellion and resistance, because they are using that toilet as a place to have a cigarette and just have some informal friendly banter, which is of course what they would have had without permission before the Gilead came into power. So there's got this huge contrast between the Gilead now and what life used to be like. And the fact that she feels ridiculously happy suggests that how much of their freedom has been removed, that even going to the toilet and having a cigarette with a friend is now something that's kind of over exaggerated as being something amazing. You know, only once things are taken away do you appreciate what you once had, perhaps. So that is the extract, and I've used the term there adjacency pairs, which is a fancy way of talking about turn taken in dialogue. So in I suppose linguistic study, adjacency pairs is the act of having a conversation and turn taking between speakers. So to summarise then, in terms of how we would connect this extract to the genre of political and social protest, we've got some AO1 and AO4 terms like this. So I would be encouraging my students to use as many of these words as possible in their answer, because the fact that we have these themes or these aspects in the extract proves to us, therefore, that this extract and therefore this novel does in fact fit perfectly within the political and social protest genre. So we have the large world, you know, the Gilead society and the government more generally, versus the small world of the Red Centre and the impact that those politics and regime change can have on individuals in the microcosm. So yes, those words are quite important because it shows that you know the political and social protest genre, but it also shows that you can connect an extract that you've never seen before to the genre. So this is all very well and good, but it's of course not your annotation of the extract which is going to get you your A level. It's going to be your answer, your essay. So for the remainder of this video, I'm going to be showing you how this all fits together and how you might want to plan an answer. So you've got, let's say you spend 45 minutes annotating and figuring out the key bits of the extract for you. You've then got to take things forward. So I would have a 3-paragraph essay. I would start with an overview. It's very important, I think, for section A, this unseen extract question, to have an overview because it helps the examiners see that you understand what's going on. I would then have a paragraph about JANINE, and I would then have a paragraph about the settings, particularly the Red Centre and then the toilet. So that would be my what I would be interested in saying. But that isn't the only thing you could do. You could talk about the aunts, you could talk about Offred. There's lots of different topics you could use as alternative paragraphs. So please don't think this is the only correct essay structure. It isn't. With English, of course, it's subjective. There's many, many different ways you could structure your essay. But because I'm going to show you an essay, this is the plan that I'm following. Okay. So to start with the overview then, or the introduction, always a good idea to have an introduction because it helps contextualize the extract for your later paragraphs. The extract in question presents the totalitarian theocracy of Gilead and the impact on individuals, mainly women. The extract proves that political and social protest writing often focuses on how the broader macrocosm of the society brings consequences to the lives and experiences of individuals in the microcosm. Here, Offred, our homodiegetic narrator, which means first person, is describing the ceremonial testifying ceremony where women are asked to publicly announce past experiences as a form of public education. However, it is made clear that JANINE is being encouraged to take the blame for something when she was actually the innocent victim. showing how the aunts are radicalizing rather than educating the women to get them to learn the expectations of Gilead placed upon women. Towards the end of the extract, Offred and Moira go to the toilet and have a cigarette in an act of rebellion. So that's your overview, or something along those lines would be an overview. The next paragraph is about JANINE and her engaging with the aunts and her interactions with the aunts. JANINE is the central character in the extract to present the manipulation and injustice inherent in the Gilead regime. She was gang raped when she was 14, and this crime is being used by the aunts to trigger public humiliation and unfairness by manipulating JANINE into admitting that the crime was her fault. This eventually happens when JANINE says, "I led them on, I deserve the pain," suggesting the aunts have been successful in warping Janine's thinking, and she is met with praise. Very good. Offred describes JANINE using a simile and an asyndetic list, weak, squirmy, blotchy, pink, like a newborn mouse, to depict her as babyish and innocent. The adjective disgusting emphasizes how the minds of the handmaids are being radicalized into thinking innocent people are actually to blame for the crimes they have endured. The dialogue also reinforces a huge power imbalance between JANINE and the other handmaids. The interrogatives, whose fault was it, and who led them on, shows the aunts in a position of power, as they are instigating the ceremony as part of a public spectacle. The epizeuxis of the replies, "Crybaby, teach her a lesson," and "her fault," shows the handmaids are being encouraged to blame an innocent woman as part of the Gilead regime. This is quite at odds with the ethos and developments brought by second-wave feminism in the 70s and 80s. So this student has guessed what second-wave feminism was. In a nutshell, getting women more rights and having more equality. So that was the paragraph about JANINE and the interactions with the handmaids and the other aunts, with some lovely kind of analysis there. The next paragraph, the final paragraph before the conclusion, is about the setting of the Red Centre itself. So with political and social protest writing, always look out for the settings, because the settings can often be important in terms of reinforcing a particular theme. So this paragraph says, also significant in the extract is the use of settings, namely the Red Centre and the toilets. At the beginning of the extract, the semantic field to do with schools and learning reinforce how the testifying ceremony is being interpreted as a learning experience, as if JANINE and the other handmaids are being educated to make themselves better. Put our hands up, clock, and green blackboard symbolises a school where learning takes place. However, there is a difference between learning and radicalisation. The other significant location in the extract is the toilet at the end of the extract, where Offred and Moira escape to for a cigarette. Here, the mirrors of glass have been removed, preventing the handmaids to see reflections of themselves, which eradicates their identity, as does changing their names to possessions of the commanders, but also prevent them from committing suicide of a mode of escape, only emphasising their oppression. The fact that Offred whispers to Moira shows a moment of secrecy and rebellion away from the antagonistic glare of the aunts. This makes Offred feel ridiculously happy, showing just how much freedom has been removed by the Gilead regime, and how simple choices of going into the toilet and having a cigarette are now huge moments of personal celebration. So they've talked about the setting, but they've then gone on to talking about what that setting of the toilets is being used for as an act of rebellion. Again, some lovely language analysis here and some comment on authorial methods for AO2. So finally, a conclusion, rounding the essay off. As a result, the extract is consistent with social and political protest literature, namely because of JANINE's vulnerability and powerlessness at the same time at which the women are being radicalised and manipulated by a powerful elite. Here, the corruption of justice and religion is made clear, as is the impact of this totalitarian theocracy on individuals. So just rounding that off there. A theocracy, of course, is when a regime will use religion as part of their vision. And what will often happen, as we see with the Taliban in the Kite Runner, is that the religious teaching or religious scripture is corrupted to suit their own extreme agenda. And that's what's happening here. Here they're using the Old Testament to kind of reinforce the fact that forcing women to have children is the right thing. Because I think there's the quote, "Have children or else I die." So in the world of the Gilead, the birth rate is falling, and they are forcing women to have children to make sure the birth rate goes up again. And that's what actually happened in 1960s Romania with the dictator Nicolae Ceausescu. So nothing in The Handmaid's Tale is actually made up. Atwood has used everything that's actually happened in real life. Nothing is imagined. Everything is real. It's happened at some point before somewhere in the world. So that is an example of the unseen extract for paper 2, section A. So in this video, what we did is we looked at the question. The question is always the same. We looked at the synopsis and annotated that. We then read and analysed the extract, and then we looked at some proper kind of words to do with the genre of this political and social protest, and then I showed you an example response. So hopefully a useful video if you are revising the unseen extract, which is paper 2 section A of AQA Literature Spec B, Political and Social Protest. Thank you very much for watching, and good luck with your studies, and all the best in your exams. Thank you.